of what I hope to be more of these conversations, public conversations with artists that I find inspiring and that have a rigor and discipline towards what I would say practices of listening to the calling that keeps them on a path towards liberation. And they all use their art practices as a way to, like as a tool to recognize where we're at, you know, in terms of our humanity and our happiness. And I shared in some of my posts that I personally find these moments of connection, real connection, as a way to be generative in a different form, not just in the kind of solo practice that we have, and then maybe the collaborative practice that we all share, and then there's the community practices. So I asked these three wonderful artists to join me in discussing a couple of ideas that have been on my mind. But first, I'd like to introduce each one of them, and I'll start with Rochelle. And Rochelle, will you share with me and the community how you identify as an artist, and a little bit about your theory on practice, very specific to creation itself?
Totally. So I am a dancer choreographer and a doula or womb worker, and I have a lot of other healing practices that I weave into that work, and that is kind of like the crux of what I reach into. I'm also from Memphis, Tennessee, born and raised, and my family has lived in the Mississippi Delta and Memphis for many generations. So a lot of how I work is mining into the culture of the Mississippi Delta, the culture of the Black South, from like foodways to just like being with the medicines my people have developed over the course of centuries to move towards liberation. And that's those, like the songs, the dances, the ways of moving, the ways of gathering, the ways of speaking, even like the way we talk in Memphis. Like I have my like New York City, accent now, but there's a way of like, that's part of the embodiment for me of being Southern and Black, and I reach for that a lot. And also the honoring of my mothers in particular in that lineage.
So to slow down, because we'll each have a little bit of time, how do you navigate what I think most people would say the appearance of two different types of interest or career paths? Like you have doula, you have a connection with herbs and healing, you have your own commitment to connection to where you come from, and then you have the physical practice of dance and song. I think my question to you is like, how do you weave those together, and what are the questions within this? Like, what are the questions that you're asking when you work?
Yeah.
Those two different questions.
Yeah, well, how do I weave them together? It's like, I think originally I came to doula work, birth work, as a way of supporting myself, just as a woman who felt very called to support other women primarily. And that I saw that as very separate initially from my dance work. And it's only in the last like couple of years where I'm now like, oh, there's actually no separation. For so long, my clients would be like, so can we like, tell me about the dancing? Can we do some dancing and all the things? And I'm like, I don't actually know, because in my mind, I hadn't integrated those, I think. And so that's more recent, that integration, where now it's like so much of the movement I offer is centered around the womb and around, helping women root into and access the power within us in that way. So I think that answers the first question. What was the second question?
No, I think you got it all in there. I think you got it all in there. Thank you so much. I'm going to go to Jamila because we were in the South. So
it's true.
True. And my same question is, would you introduce yourself and your practices that you do?
Yeah. Well, I do a lot. I feel like, but I'm also happy to be in good company in that way. I'm an interdisciplinary artist. I think my introduction to art was probably through painting mostly and music. I sing also. I still sing. I grew up singing and painting. I still do both. But I feel like I was a pretty shy person when it comes to entertainment, and I kind of found my way to performance from being shy. It was like, oh, I don't have to look at people or dance for them in a way that I don't want to. I can I can look at the moon and call it a work, and it is a work. So I kind of found my way to performance through that, and through performance, I really kind of delved into installation. And so installation work is probably like the biggest part of my practice now. I'm obsessed with objects and meaning and the history of things, the history of places, my familial history, ancestor work. And so I'm constantly trying to gather the pieces to make it make sense for me. And I think right now, that's a big part of what's happening, is like finding home, redefining what that means when you're not actually there, and maintaining relationships when people have, graduated to the next plane. Like, how do I still receive guidance? How do I still maintain the love of my grandmothers and grandfathers and all my ancestors? Like, how do I stay in touch in a way? And I think that's my work. It's just trying to maintain an open channel, but also providing a space for other people to do something similar, or I guess, spaces that help people heal, or, see, just rest is a big part of my work. I rest a lot as a way to think, or to I'm really into non-action, where I just lay down in the studio, do nothing for a few weeks, and then something happens.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see we're all supporting you right now? We're like, yes.
I want to be in that piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have a specific question about the relationship with object, because I have a collection of a vocabulary of objects that I'm working with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious where you feel that history lies in the object, and how do you form? Is it a listening practice? How do you animate that relationship with objects? Like, why and what and how?
Right. I think some of it's super personal. My grandmother was a collector of handkerchiefs, and slips. She loves slips. Both things of which I now have in my collection because they were hers, and so I have them. My grandfather kept all his license plates and just these little sentimental things that people do, and I think I started collecting those kinds of objects to remember them, or have a way. But also objects from stores too, heavy into altars, which I'm sure is not a surprise to anyone in this space. So I'm always kind of thinking of vessels and ways to make additions to those kinds of pieces, and spiritual practices. Thinking how else can I answer that question? And then sometimes I think I just get lucky and something comes to me. I was walking to work the other day and found a hawk feather, and now it's my favorite thing. So sometimes I think I'm just open to receiving those kinds of gifts that kind of make up their own meaning in my life. I don't think I always am aware of why it's happening, but it happens a lot.
I just got this image of your specific art practice, almost like this rope or handrail, and you're just like following it forward. It's a different relationship of like, I am the maker, here is my clay, I will manipulate this clay and create, or I have an idea. That idea of where the spirit comes from and ownership of things, and the fact that I appreciate this doing nothing practice shifts that relationship of the maker and the receiver and the object subject stuff. And yesterday was Martin Luther King Day, and there was different sides in which people were responding to that, and one of them is like, never stop, keep pursuing, never stop, keep persevering. And then I liked, my mom's organization, Arts for Art, had images of him and his family, his life on vacation, and the importance of rest. Yeah. And I was like, yes, that's what I needed to hear. Yeah. And that's like, sorry, one more thing that also inspires me is like, it's not just one thing. The art making doesn't have, it just, like the moon has so many phases, it's not just all about the fullness. Right. Of like, oh, or whatever that means for me, you, and others. Djassi, we've known each other since childhood, sharing a lot of similar, you all share a lot of similar things. Please share with us your art practice.
Art practice, Lower East Side girl, Harlem girl. We met at Manhattan East Junior High School. That is an important aspect of my story because I have been craving dance classes from my parents, and as one of 4 kids being sent to Montessori school before that, they made it very clear that they couldn't afford classes. And my English teacher, our English teacher, Mr. Jones, who taught Horton and Graham, right, made it clear to my mom that I could do scholarship programs all throughout New York. So that's part of my origin story as a dancer, and I cherish it so much. So I'm a dancer and choreographer. I'm also an anthropologist and writer, and I am also a doula. I've been a doula for 19 years, going on 19 years next month, February 23rd. And I am a designer of things, earrings, bags, clothes, and I'm a mother, a 12-year-old. And so my practice started working as a dancer for companies, really striving, just wanting to be a dancer, to experience what that's like, to be able to live an art form that I felt I was always struggling to do. But the anthropology aspect of it, when I was in college, I went to Brazil and studied Orisha dance. So talking about the information that the ancestors want us to know. I was inspired to go to Barnard because of Zora Neale Hurston and Ntozake Shange and, the Catherine Dunham. So I was like, dancer, anthropology, yes, we have to understand why movement is such a part of how I was raised, and it's taken for granted, but I'm fighting this study to be this trained dancer. So I think navigating the anthropology and the connection to my lineage really strengthened me for later on, like how things were connected later on. But I did tour for years as a dancer, and then went back to Brazil to learn the language, and then ended up living in Italy and working on television as a dancer. And that experience really is important to my current practice because being an expat for almost a decade allowed me to be whatever kind of Black person I wanted to be. And as a New Yorker, uptown, downtown, boarding school, why you talk like a white girl? All of that, I got it in so many different ways, and it wasn't until as an adult and an artist I could be any kind of Black dancer, any kind of Black person. Nobody knew. I could wear my hair any kind of way. Everything shifted for me, that experience, in terms of how I embodied owning my art, and not just being what I felt was a pawn. Because it was like the Ailey world or like the Momix, Pilabolis, like downtown white dance world, very, very different. But I'm grateful for those experiences because coming back as a mother, another part of I think what's come into my practice in terms of making work on film was making forever work, having toured for years internationally, and knowing that one, a lot of people I loved, I couldn't share my heart and my dance with, and two, I was performing for the other all of the time. Mm-hmm. And then I lost my brother in a motorcycle accident in 2012, and that's when I said, I'm doing only work on film that can be disseminated and can be shared. Obviously, I still am a performance artist, but it was really important for me as someone who picked up a camera at 13 and have always had like a relationship with photography and film. I was not being documented well. I was that little brown blub in the VHS tape, and you know, the art, who I was as an artist was not archived. So I became interested in how we archive our art, but also how we archive our path, our history, our lineage, like what we're translating through our work. And so a lot of my work since then on film and as a mover, as a performance artist in site-specific spaces has been about mothering, because of my daughter being part of my work a lot, and also about almost like awakening a reclamation of information that we all have, so that by the time we've had that experience together, we're more connected, the collective. And I think we're all translating information for each other. And whether it's through, because I do a lot of vocalizing in my performances as well, I sing as well, but I'm not a trained singer, but it's always that moment of impulse of what's coming through me is for everyone here, because they're gonna bounce it back in a different way. So that's what I love about performance, but I also am working more with how to use the medium of film, use that the way that we are sharing information on screens even more, to have like this constant daily reminder of our need for a connection to the earth for survival, not in this like poetic way. You know, I'm obsessed with mushrooms, and I'm obsessed with grounding. I'm obsessed with hugging trees, and, you know, and making that, you know, I'll come and I'll put some leaves on the stage, you know, I'll walk on the stage and then all of a sudden, dirt! Let's just get some dirt. So, you know, that.
She loves dirt too.
So, yeah, I feel like sometimes it feels really basic. It's like pretty, you know, ABC, come on. And but the fact that we as colonized people, stolen people, people compartmentalize into these spaces that we live in, these boxes, these cement boxes on this earth. Sometimes it is a really radical act to take the earth into a room and make it a performance and say, we have to remember something. So I find myself doing that in my performance work and with my film, searching for the messages that are coming through to really just translate what needs to be said over and over again. The art that we're creating is the art of not just self-liberation, but earth salvation.
Ooh.
Word.
Earth salvation.
There's a bookend, yes.
Yeah, there's
You
a
recorded it
bookend.
because I didn't say that.
Yes, you did. I loved
it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think I have at a crossroads. I kind of would love, I think it'll happen naturally, but I am very much interested in like, I think that at times individually we ignore it because it's so part of our own internal vernacular that we don't always spell it out. But like, what is your interest? What are the things that you're trying to, what is stimulating your curiosity to keep moving forward? I know a little bit, you have this connection to water and mermaid. Like, that's a very specific aesthetic. And I think each of you introduce an aesthetic in a world that interests me. Like, how do you use that group of material to create story with? Because I use different material, and with that material, you know, oh, that's a Miriam place, she's throwing gravel, and you know, or like, why Miriam in your gravel, and why the tarps, and you know, but those objects, why I was asking, like, I have my vocabulary right now is like vessel and vase, and trying to see if I can listen can I leave a message in that vase, or did somebody else leave a message? And it's very playful and very kind of stretching the way that I am hearing the other. You know, like in which forms do I experience the mystical or the artistic muse coming through? And I do. Like, I love vases, and I know that there's a history of the vase as the form, as the female form, as the container. And that you'll see that in Buddhist, imagery, and other, I'm sure, many other cultures. And rope is important, and that tension between, rope to me is like something to lynch somebody with, hang them from a tree, rope. Also uterus, umbilical cord, rope. Also something that I want to be tethered to. It has all these paradoxes, and I enjoy learning from those things. And we all have our flavor. When you create, it will be a Jamila creation, Djassi, Rochelle. And so,
paradox. I'm sorry.
yeah, please, go in.
That's helpful. I feel like I do feel like as interdisciplinary artists, maybe that's a lot of what we do. I think some of the materials, when you asked me earlier why I choose objects or certain materials, I think sometimes it's to try to have an experience that maybe my ancestors have had. So I grew tobacco for a project, for instance, for a few years. I grew tobacco and from seed, not really a gardener or a farmer, but wanted to know what that was like as a person from Kentucky, as a person that formerly enslaved people. I wanted to see what that felt like to actually see that process, to witness it. And what I learned was, and what I knew already, but what was affirmed was, people were captured and brought here to be slaves, but they were scientists and they were agriculturalists and they were brilliant to even know how to do this thing. And so from that experience, I grew this thing, I made performances with it, and I also made paper from it and objects from it. So it just kind of kept materializing in different ways until it finally became something that I could actually hold.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, that's it.
So like a sad thing into like another kind of experience.
I have something so similar where I did actually the same thing with cotton.
Dope.
And I'm from King Cotton capital.
There's some up there.
And so for me, my family's history is like really interwoven with this relationship of being enslaved with cotton, and cotton fields still surround Memphis whenever I go home and I leave the city. So I grew the cotton and I made a dance ritual honoring that relationship, and also the ways that we worked with the plant medicine ancestrally. And the fact that like a lot of enslaved African women were working with cotton to maintain their reproductive autonomy, even in these like dire circumstances. And that to me, I was like, oh. And then I had these moments too where I was traveling and I saw cotton growing wild in the Caribbean, and I was like, oh, I don't have to attach these ideas of what this plant is to like that I've been raised with, this like honestly trigger point of being like, ooh, cotton. So the paradox also of like shifting that.
I love that you brought that up, and I'm going to bring in the intergenerational, because I have this bunch of cotton to show my daughter what it's like, because it wasn't until I was an adult that I actually physically, I don't remember where I was, probably the one American tour I ever did, one company, and I actually saw cotton grow. And then these last 2 years, I was able to live for several months a year with my daughter in St. Croix, the Virgin Islands, and on the pathway showing her where my grandparents used to live when they retired there, up this road, there's a bush of cotton. Fascinating that my 10-year-old could see what that's like, and then I would talk to her about like, this is what it means to pick cotton. But I think because it had so much stigma attached to enslaved Africans in our history, I never even wanted to have a relationship with it, but it completely shifted in these last 2 years being on the island and passing these kind of picking it with her and then being like, so we're gonna make something, taking it home and combing it out and playing with it and just it's free, it's there, it's what is that to have that connection with the earth, even that sense of
that
being able to climb a mango tree, pull over on the side of the road and get her free fruit. That experience was really important because it gave us that connection with the land of not ownership but partnership,
stewardship,
that are indigenous,
wild, or like versus in this like industrial agriculture
or lines of cotton. Like that's how I always thought of it. No, it's a bush.
Monoculture,
It's a bush.
To see it going wild, that also reminds us that we are wild.
Yes.
You know, and that feels so powerful for me, like that juxtaposition.
Yeah, I always thought there were like little rows and stuff because you see the pictures. There are these huge bushes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I want to distill something for. I love creation. I mean, I'm a big art fan. My family has been super supportive. Your family, a lot of us come from families that are really testifying towards the power of being an artist and the role of an artist in community as vital. And I'm hearing the relationships that you all are sharing to material and growth and evolution and understanding and transference and all of this is like our practices as artists are like a practice of holding the land, like a practice of almost like our own real life docu-series or investigatory series in which we're embodying a practice and then sharing that practice of what can happen when we connect. And I'm missing some words. I'm hoping you can help me with them. But I'm talking about like an interest in identity, history, moving forward in a progressive way by looking at these things and experiencing them opposed to referring them to something that is separate from us. And that's like, I think the key is like, as an artist, I'm not preaching to anybody on how to do their work. That's the interesting thing, is to be his sideways and be like, whoa, you do it that way? Awesome. But I do think that in some ways, all four of us are definitely looking for ways to, as you said, like, can I touch this and experience some of what they experience and understand the complexity of it, and that it is not a hit, like, is history dead or is it alive? You know, there is this wonderful, I heard somebody speak in conversation, it cannot be found on the YouTubes, but in conversation, saying that it takes many, many years for something to be history. Like, something could happen last year or 5 years, but it doesn't have any meaning for a very long time. You know, and when does something have meaning? And like, how do we work as conduits or portals to keep something alive until maybe our community has done the healing that they need to do? And when I say our community, I mean Miriam Parker. You know what I mean? Like, let's start with myself. I don't want to be so like, oh, I'm not, you know, let's just Miriam. I need to heal. I'm not over it yet. You know, and one of the subject matters was time travel that I was thinking about as an important tool for me to not be nervous, like the really base stuff. In terms of the emptiness of time, the way I experience time, at this time I have to be here, I'm this age, I should have done that. Death, fear, time, how do I access time? How do I be in full blossom? You know, this, how do I live the life? So that's one idea, and that time does not exist outside of myself. And that there is, as much as we can play with our experience of memory and history, we can play with time. And I thought to introduce that to y'all because it's also something that I think is innate in art making, which it becomes portals. Like,
Oh yeah.
I mean, music for me is the number one trigger. I listen to a song, it reminds me of this. I dress a certain way, or I see myself, you know, like just that people are craving also to work with time. And I don't, you know, again, I'm gonna, you know, call me biased, but art is the most important thing in the world. You know what I mean? And know it. And if I had a message to myself and anybody, like, learn to find that for yourself, because it will be your little own time travel to experience.
Yeah.
Practice for me, slowing down. Speeding up.
What you said.
Go. No. Interrupt
What
me.
you said about your practice and just being still, and then what you said about just, you know, just everything in time travel, and what we're bringing through as artists, and how and why we create, kind of calls to the work that has come forth with my daughter and her dreaming. And so there's a series that I'm working on right now, photographic and film series, that has a lot to do with recorded dreams of my daughter. I've been recording her since she was younger, because I really felt like she was, you know, we all feel that, babies, but I was like, no, I'm actively listening.
Yeah.
And it was until years later, some of these recordings are 8, she's 12 now, 8 and 10 years old, and I would discover like messages in these dreams she would have. And so a lot of the relationship with water, I learned about the way that we embody culture differently in different spaces in Brazil, when the religion wasn't a performance, it was a part of everyday life.
Yeah.
And the preservation of culture that happened through the subtleties of music and dance that infiltrated every part of culture, not just the ceremony. That's what really took me, and that's what made me go, oh. So even though I was studying under a priestess of Oshun, who's the goddess of the river, and, you know, there's a relationship with Imaya, the goddess of the sea, how I translate my work now is not in the ways that I've seen. Like, I have nothing against the attempts to reclaim something that we weren't taught, but it's like less of a regurgitation of a language and more of like, what is the new way that I'm relating to this thing? What is the evolution of that? Like, I feel like my daughter had shown me an evolutionary way to really revere Mami Wata Yemaya and our mermaid lineage and whatever that is, you know, as well as, you know, other aspects of things that I've experienced with her, like her having a temper tantrum at 2 years old and me realizing that she needs to hug this tree every time she leaves the park. Little things like that. Not noticing the way that we receive information as adults, you know, so that experience of mothering really helped me listen more and think about time more, because it took me, you know, 8 years to realize what she was saying as I am making this film and pairing it with images that are of now and going, oh my gosh, this is part of the key of the way forward for me as a mother, as a woman, you know, this umbrella of divine feminine that is reawakening and helping so many people understand, you know, why they're here, where they are, you know. A lot of that has to do with so my relation to time travel is relating to being a mother and what I feel like these new, maybe why I was called to doula work as well, like just why the babies call forth for us to translate things differently.
I love that you all do the doula work.
Do the
doula work. Yeah, I'm a mom also who was fortunate enough to have a doula. So it's a special relationship.
Fortunate to be called to it, to not have like gone to study, but be called to it over and over again. it was a wonderful thing because I did feel for a long time like my dance and my performance and my, performer personality, entertainment industry was different from myself as a doula, as someone who worked with herbs, even to call myself a healer or whatever. That was something that was very separate. And then while I was in Italy, actually, one of the women that I was working with helped me form something I started calling Belly Ballet, because she was like, well, you're here with the baby, just show me something, you know?
Yeah.
And then more of that, came through that, the more that we move on and with the earth, with this relationship with herbs, like even just telling my clients different things, like, oh no, take the baby outside once a day, or little things like that. So everything started to inform the other. So I think now I'm more confident in sharing things that I think I always thought were just innately me, because it is not. Like, we're getting pushed to doula work, or pushed to dance work, or pushed to performance work, or brought to be mothers for a reason, right? It's all part of the artistic path, I believe.
Definitely.
I like what you said also, as a question, like, how do we as adults listen? The childlike spirit is more in it, and how do we as adults listen? And my stomach, I just taught this retreat. You were there. A meditation retreat, and one of the things that as I was teaching, I was really sewing it together, which is like a very important unifying experience for me with my spirituality, art, Miriamness, is that we are on a path. And that path has a sound. And that sound is a calling. And that calling is asking us to question the normality of things. That calling is saying that things either don't need to be like this. You don't need to be in this relationship like this. You don't need to be in a house that is too small for you. You don't need to be whatever. Yeah. All the nagging stuff that's like, there's something's wrong. That calling is asking us to look for the extraordinary. And so returning to like, how do we as adults listen? I can't imagine a different entranceway into creating a body of work than, all right, what do I need to do right now? Like, how do I begin? Well, what is she saying? Or they are saying, what is that calling? But at the same time, to be more vulnerable, that's kind of the idealistic space, and it kind of really does drive me. But there's also this other reality of assuming very little from the world. Like, I'm just gonna do my thing, who knows if it's gonna reap fruit or not. Yeah. And I know that the younger generation, they're very concerned about the reaping of the fruit because it's expensive now. It's getting harder and harder and harder to navigate through this world when you are navigating through an inner world. Like, you have you're trying to keep connecting to this, and the world, it feels hard. It's hard.
It's very hard.
It's hard, right? And I don't have an answer to that for myself. I know that it's, just a matter of making it so they're in it, my faith in what I'm doing, right? But so I don't know if these connected, but the really itchy is that for me, I wasn't assuming much. I felt from my growing up, I didn't belong here. I mean, the white community, Jewish community loved me. My black community was much harder on me. That's my experience. It was like, where all of this struggle, I was like, let me just be as small as possible, really. And I don't recommend that. But that was kind of my way of survival, was like, I am a wall. I am a bucket. That is like, survive by being small. And there was a seismic shift, and I felt like the pain and sadness of cruelty got a fucking internal microphone to my sadness, and it was like the whole world was yelling. And I'm talking about the reckoning of our history, that all of a sudden it was like a lid opened from the sewer and all of it came out, and I was not expecting that amplitude. It made me feel all kinds of stuff. So that's a whole nother maybe conversation talk. But my ask, and I really wanted to hear from all of you, was why do you think now there is even an iota of attention to Black art, music? I mean, music maybe, yeah, the dance and sing, but visual art is, for the aristocrat, is this sort of intellectualized world. The whole thing. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to name it. I'll let y'all name it. But no, but that's how I feel. I feel like there was all of a sudden.
You're talking about like after the great uprising.
Yeah, I'm talking about
this resurgence.
Yeah.
We're talking about 2020, and
I'm
all
talking
of a sudden,
about like if you have any Black friends, support them. I'm talking about like
all the Black visual artists.
Yeah.
Supported and funded.
And this what I'm saying, the insurgence of attention. Not to say that it's real, sustaining, or all that much, and it's, one would say we deserve $1 trillion. It's not about thank you so much. No. I'm asking, what do you think? Why?
Well, I think that's a big question.
I know. We can just talk about it as much as we're able.
I appreciate it. I think the most clear perspective I have is we've always deserved attention and support, and I think much of our making is highly functional beyond just being for a museum space. Maybe folks are starting to see, maybe it's performative. I think it's largely performative, some of the giving, not even giving, but however the people are choosing to support. I don't think there can be too much of it though. I think it's complicated, obviously complicated. Yeah, that's the clearest perspective I have right now. But also,
do you feel the change though in your own experience? Like,
not really.
Okay.
Not really.
Cool.
But also, that's another conversation about like paths. Mm-hmm. Like when you went to school, where you went to school, who you went to school with. Like which is a super white thing to talk about, but it's like that's. For an artist, to me, like, it's so freaking formulaic that it just hurts.
That's so interesting. You're talking about like dance, like who the
not
politics.
Not even just dance. I mean, just art
world.
Yeah,
politics.
and I do think. We could just touch on like MFA. Like, do you got one? Do you not have one? What did you do after that or between that? Did you go to a residency? Which one? Just all the gatekeeping that comes with all that shit. And so no, I don't feel highly affected by it as an artist. I had a very different scholastic path. I took my time. I became a mother very early in my life and prioritized those things. And so I just finished school in 2020. So it's a different way of some of the other artists that I've witnessed and their path. Very different.
I like that you brought up the school thing because I finished graduate school in 2018 and then the pandemic happened in 2020, and it wasn't until graduate school, I was that type of dancer where they asked, who do you work with? That was the validation. Who are you working with? That was the validation for us. And then it wasn't until then that I was like, residencies, grants. So this is how the non-mandates do it. Like, I didn't realize that in order to be, because I had done it in Italy, just freelance on, commercial work and no politics of academics and universities there in that way at all. It's just mafia. But it's a whole other thing. It's just if it's your cousin,
Right.
you know.
Right.
But definitely going to graduate school made me realize, like, I've always been reticent towards dance academia because I felt like the dance academics were not movers. We're not people who worked in the field and struggled to get that show up and bartended for weeks to be able to fund that performance project or whatever it was that I felt I and other people were doing. And I do think that that is a very important note because a lot of individual artists outside of the visual arts world don't know never knew until recently in the pandemic how much funds there are out there to support individual work, and the funds weren't allocated towards specific demographics like they are now.
Yeah, which is weird too.
Which is weird, and I will say that
But important.
it's weird and important, you know, but there was a quote. So I recently went to the Loophole Retreat in Venice, where Simone Leigh, who was the first Black woman to represent the U.S. in the Biennale, brought like 60 Black women scholars and artists to talk, and then 7 Black women to attend. And I think that for me was like a big example of like this attention to Black art all of a sudden, because it wasn't just her, it was also France had a Black woman representing them, and the UK, I think, you know, and so there is a shift. And I found an article that she was interviewed in 2019 for like CBS. It was like a YouTube thing. And this white journalist is like, oh, you just sold a vase for like $18,000. Do you think this is like, you know, Black art's getting this attention? You think this is like a trend? And I loved her answer because she's like, no, this is exactly.
She's always so cool though.
She's like, it's not a trend, you know, and it maybe it has something to do with reparations because there's always white guilt, but it is exactly what needs to be happening right now, not just because, yes, Black artists have always needed to be more seen and not brushed under the rug, but because of what Black artists are bringing to the table right now needs to be, it is the medicine. A lot of it is the medicine that everyone needs to hear.
That's what I was thinking about. I want to hear what you have to say, Rochelle. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly that there's a way that Black artists have our fingers on a pulse of like, honestly, being present with suffering and grief and transmuting it, that the entire world can benefit from witnessing and learning from. And they have always known that. There's a reason that like all American culture is actually derived from
Black culture.
Black people, you know, because we've been in this, we've been doing this, you know, and I think that's really important that I see culture as our medicine. And, you know, we as Black people, we know that our culture is our medicine because we've been through so much. That is what we've had to move through it. And the artist is the one who's holding that lineage of culture and like continuing to shift it and work with it. So to me, it's like an inevitable process that also must happen for the earth and humanity to reckon with the current moment we're in of like climate crisis and grief and like late stage capitalism, all of it. We need, like, what else is there to do, honestly? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like that's, yeah.
I want to just do, I'd love to have us do this conversation again in 6 months. I'm putting the seed out there because I see this as a chance for us to support each other in the places that we're seeing blind a little bit, because there's a reality of, you know, like I'm very visual, so the image is there's a people, you're trying to get into the speakeasy and you have your Black card and you're like MFA, Yale, this, you know, and they're like, okay, come on in. Okay, where did you go? We don't know. You could be a little dangerous for the cause. We're putting you on hold. Like, there's all kinds of politics and layers and layers and layers and layers and layers.
Yeah.
But I feel like, I think the empowerment of it all, of saying, you are sitting on your birthright is valuable.
Yeah.
And like, how do we create a perfect instrument for Jamila, for Djassi, for Rochelle, for each person that's listening, so that we can hear you nicely. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like that instrument and that birthright to be heard is saying that you are a contribution. Feeling that we're a contribution. And I think, and I say that only because of what happens when I tell you, we need you. She's going down, we're at the forefront, we need your special wiggy wiggy boo boo. And you'll be like, I got it. I'm gonna do this weird plant dance and then I'm gonna throw it over here. And you're like, this is perfect. And this is gonna, and we're gonna lie down and rest it out. And I'll be like, this is exactly the medicine needed. But to really allow a new, I think for me, this idea of being hidden, obviously not recommended, but and the growing into a sense of purpose, ownership that I'm sitting on something important. And I think that's why, for me, there's some weird stuff in the politics of this, what I call this kind of fabricated, strange insurgence of attention. But the most thing is it's helped me to identify that I have what people need.
Yes. Exactly, and that's what I was just gonna say. And then also taking the
final statements, because we're gonna.
Oh, sorry.
Just to say,
taking this moment in time out of it and talking about time travel. Like, I'm constantly breaking away from my ego because it's like, okay, Miriam, I guess it's about you. Okay, Djassi, yes, but it's not, because it's your grandmothers coming through, your great-great-grandmas, your great-great-great-great-grandmas. Sometimes I don't know what's pushing me towards that thing, you know. And I think the listening is what's so important in that, and letting go of like there is the I am always, right? We always have that I am, but it's that awareness of it and letting go of this ego that's fabricated within this patriarchal society construction we've been in for 8,000 years, you know, so that we can step out of that and know that the more that we attach to the higher I am, the more that we connect. Just like this conversation, just like what's happening here, and why I love being in circle with women who are, and not only women, you know, men who are aware of their wombs, you know, people who are aware of this energy of the creator, the divine feminine, and her really calling to us, because it's not us. It's not just about you and them wanting to buy into blackness. It's about the information. You know?
Rochelle, any closing shares?
I mean, I'll just like echo the divine feminine, because like to me that's like what it always comes back to, and that's like so much of what I do my best to humble myself to and be in reverence to. And you know, especially I think a lot about climate, and I think especially in this moment, like, what does it mean to humble ourselves to the earth, humble ourselves to nature in that feminine way.
Nice.
I'm just enjoying that so much of what I'm listening to with you all keeps reminding me of like Buddhist mentality of poison into medicine and alchemy, and just like the ability to transmute things. Yeah. So I'm thankful for that.
All right. Thank you so very much for joining me. Thank you, Djassi. Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you, Jamila.
Thank you.
Love, love, love.